Albert Einstein once said that the most important decision you'll ever make is to decide once and for all whether you live in a universe that is supportive, that supports you and is friendly, or whether you live in a universe that is hostile and is non-supportive.
So we got a program. What was the program? It said, you don't heal yourself, the doctor heals you. A negative belief can hurt you, if not kill you, as much as a positive belief can heal you.
How often do you hear you have to take a pill for virtually any ailment that might be concerning you, and then if you don't have one, they'll invent one, you know?
And create new ailments.
Right, exactly.
Your body has these reserve cells, and the understanding of these reserve cells is that they will repair or replace anything that your intention is focused on.
He said, I can change my behavior, and there's a lot of things that I can change in my life, but the thing that I can't change is my DNA. I can't change my genetics. I can't help the way I am. It's just what I inherited. And I sat there and thought, that's what so many people think.
And it's a major disconnect because we've been all programmed with a belief that we are sort of victims of our heredity. That we didn't pick the genes that we came with, we can't change the genes that we come with, and then hook that with the belief that the genes control who we are, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, I'm a victim. I can't get out of my own heredity. And it's an unfortunate situation because what we now know in this new field is called, the great name is called epigenetic control. So what you say, epigenetic control, what you're saying is control above the genes. And this is where it comes into the simple reality that the environment and our perception of the environment actually can rewrite our genetic code. It doesn't change the DNA. It changes the readout of the DNA. DNA are the genes, and genes are blueprints. You can create over 30,000 different variations from the same blueprint, the same gene. And all of a sudden it says, then you're not limited by your genes, you're limited, if anything, by your perception and your belief about the world that you live in, because that's the information that's going in and affecting the genes. That it has now been established that a minimum of 1/3 and more likely 2/3 of all medical healing, which includes surgery and drugs and everything else, is all accomplished through what is called the placebo effect. And that basically says that it's the mind of the patient and their belief system that ultimately determines whether the drugs or the surgery are going to manifest any difference. Basically, arthroscopic surgery, and I forgot, I think they do about 180,000 of these operations a year. A doctor at Houston wanted to do a study. He said he really wanted to find out, was it the rinsing out of the fluid or the scraping of the knee that really provided the major healing process. So he was going to do this as a research study, and the woman who was helping him said, but you must include a placebo group. And he fabricated a placebo operation. What he would do is he'd make the 2 incisions. The patient, of course, couldn't see their knee. There was a draping over it. And what he would do was put on the video screen a surgery that he had done earlier in videotape from somebody else. And so what he would do is the patient would get the incisions, they'd watch the surgery, and he would talk through the surgery like, you know, overdubbing, saying, oh yeah, everything's going great, Mr. X, and Mr. X is watching the screen and all that. So that was the placebo surgery. Didn't do anything, made 2 incisions, sewed it back up. They looked at the results, and the results were every process was equally the same. Whether they rinsed it out, whether they scraped it and rinsed it out, or whether they just did the incisions and nothing at all. He had to own, and it was like really difficult, he had to say that all I'm doing is creating a very elaborate and very expensive placebo. And the mind did the healing. There's something called the nocebo effect. And the nocebo effect is essentially the same as a placebo effect, but it's based on something different. It says a negative belief can hurt you, if not kill you, as much as a positive belief can heal you. And so the real serious issue is that it's really the power of belief. Positive or negative are equally powerful but go in opposite directions. Right. The function of the mind is to create coherence between your beliefs and the reality that you experience. So if you have a belief in your mind that you can't do something, or that you are, susceptible to something, and that's your belief, then the mind's function is to create coherence so that you will manifest that belief to be true. So it's very interesting because Henry Ford, he would say, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. When a patient hears that they cannot heal themselves, when there's something that's terminal, or any of these other issues, that perception alone can stop the entire healing process right there.
You know, my friend Deepak Chopra, do you know Deepak?
Yes.
You know, talked about one of his best friends, he died, he had a black mark on his lung. And when he found out that he had this black mark on his lung, it meant lung cancer, and he was devastated. And within 3 weeks, he was dead. When they were cleaning out his office, they found x-rays that had been taken of him 20 years before. Same black mark was on the lung, the exact same. It had been there for 20 years, but it wasn't until he found out and thought that this was a brand new thing, and then the mind began to take over.
And when they're ready, this is the fun part. There's something called spontaneous remission. And what is a spontaneous remission? Well, these are people, let's say, with terminal illnesses. And everybody counts them out. And then for some particular reason, which I'll get into in a second, something happens, and all of a sudden they get up out of that deathbed and they're no longer sick. And you want to say, well, what is the one common underlying feature that connects all spontaneous remission? You know what makes their health come back is because they let go of all of the things that actually gave them the disease, their belief issues, because they let it go, because they said, well, I don't have time to think about this, I'm just going to go out and enjoy my life. In that enjoyment of life and letting go of the belief, they change their perceptions, and the beautiful part about it is, as fast as you change your perception is as fast as you reprogram the cells. The cells are programmable and instantaneous.
A thing called neuro-linguistic programming. And NLP is nothing more than finding, with depressed patients, what we have found with people who are severely depressed and who've been on Prozac and so on, what we do is we take them off the Prozac and they measure the brain and the chemistry of the brain, and then they will ask the person to no longer identify with an event in their life that is causing them to be depressed, but instead to step outside of their body, to become the observer to it. And instead of saying, okay, here's another thing that's causing me to be depressed, you say, you put your attention on something else. And the thing you put your attention on is, there goes my brain again misfiring. It is doing something that it has been trained to do, and you're the observer, you're just watching it. And when people then are trained to put their attention on any moment in their life, that they were happy, that they were fulfilled, that they were, as you mentioned, that they were in love, that the chemist, then they measure the chemistry through an MRI. They measure the chemistry of their brain, and their brain has changed exactly the same way that taking one of these pills does, except there's no side effects.
One of the biggest obvious facts that always gets me upset is Prozac, one of the biggest selling drugs on the planet, has been verified in a laboratory testing by the drug companies to be no more effective than a sugar pill. And yet it's billions of dollars in this. And that's because people believe in Prozac. But that's called the placebo effect. And yet the side effects from Prozac are disastrous. Your own brain is your best pharmacy. Everything in your head will fix everything in your body. And that's all we really need to know, but we need to re-educate ourselves to access that. So the fate of the cell was controlled not by the genes. The fate of the cell was controlled by the environment. We see ourselves as single individual entities. This is a misperception. You are not a single entity. You are a community, because the living things are called cells, and you are made up of about 50 trillion cells. So your body is a community. And why that's relevant is when I would work in my cell cultures and I'd take my culture dish and put it into a bad environment, the cells will physically get sick. You can see that. They'd stop growing. They start dying. And then I take that culture dish, same dish, move it out of that bad environment, put it into a good environment. The cells would immediately recover, start growing and reproducing and flourishing. Why is that important? Because think about this as who you are. You are skin-covered petri dishes. You have 50 trillion cells in your petri dish under your skin. You take your petri dish and put it in this negative environment, I can assure you, I already know what's going to happen. You're going to cause those cells to get sick. Not that the cells are organically sick, they're just complementing what the environment is. And the relevance? Take your skin-covered petri dish, move it into a better environment, and the cells will immediately get well. And the relevance about that is you're not a victim, you're a master. You are the controller of this, and we were not teaching that in school. All we were teaching is, victims, you don't heal yourself, somebody else does it, and that was totally wrong.
Bruce, you were saying you change your thinking, and that is what erases, essentially, the disease. But how do you tell your cells from your mind, go do it now, please? I mean, is it that simple?
Well, it's simple, and then there's a little mystery. So let's clear the mystery up. There's two parts to the mind. There's the conscious part and the subconscious part. And they're profoundly different pieces. They're not the same thing. The conscious part has your source, your spiritual connection to it. It's your thinking mind. But here's what's important. The conscious part is the part of the mind that has your wishes, your desires, your aspirations, what you want from life. The subconscious mind is a machine. It's a record playback device. You habituate a program, you repeat something enough times, it's recorded in the subconscious mind, you push the play button, and it continues to play that for the rest of your life unless you rewrite the program. There's been a tendency for us to think that we run our lives with our conscious mind. I want this in my life, this is my desires, these are the things that I want. So we have a perception that our conscious mind is running the show. It has now been recognized by neuroscientists that this is totally incorrect. That the conscious mind only operates about 5% of the day at the most, and generally about 1% of the time, meaning your life is being driven by your subconscious. Now here's where the disconnect comes from. The primary programs in your subconscious mind you acquired from other people. We now know very clearly that we are already downloading programs in utero. When we are in a fetal stage, we're already downloading behaviors that we're acquiring from our parents. And when you're born, it's already been determined about half your personality is already established at the time of birth. Things that we have no cognizance of, no awareness of, because they were so early in our lives, are things that are programming our lives on a day-by-day basis, which means there's a tendency to disempower us, and that's what the programs in the subconscious are. You've heard parents talk to kids like, who do you think you are? You don't deserve this. You're not smart enough. You're a sickly child. And here's the simple point. If you're under 6 years of age and you hear these proclamations, they go straight down into the subconscious mind and they're programmed there. Now you ask, why is my life difficult? And the answer is this, because only 5% of your life is coming from what you want, and 95% is the program from the subconscious mind, which is programmed by others, and almost all of that is limiting your ability. So 95% of the day, you're not following what you want, you're following other people's programs.
I'm not talking about a terminal illness here. I'm talking about how can I make myself feel better in the next 30 minutes while I sit down to work out this writing deadline and so on. And things like you talk about in your book, things like meditation, things like getting quiet. But even more than that, and we talked about this at the break, it's like what kind of energy field do you find yourself in? So this isn't just like good stuff to read about and to write about. This is something that you can really go inside, whoever you are listening, whatever your life situation is, you have to make decisions. I don't go for physicals. I don't want anybody looking at me and telling me this, this test is up, this one is down, this is an indication, you got a 17% of living another 3 years, you got an 18%. I don't want to hear anything like that. I figure that the less I know about what is wrong, and the more I believe about what I have the power to do something about, isn't that changing your perception? Isn't that entering into that subconscious world and putting your attention on something that you want rather than on something you don't want? Albert Einstein once said that the most important decision you'll ever make is to decide once and for all whether you live in a universe that is supportive, that supports you and is friendly, or whether you live in a universe that is hostile and is non-supportive.